Hello! In this series of tutorials and introductions, we're going to work with the Linksys E900 router, the one you can see over here on my left. It is not state-of-the-art router, nor is it the fastest one around, but it's cheap and affordable should we break it in one of our experiments. And you're more than welcome to borrow a router home to experiment on or to try experiments back home. More information will come in the class. In this first part here, we're going to look at the device and see what information we can find on the device. We will look at especially we will look at the firmware, the build number, and if it's not up to date, we'll make sure that the device have the latest update and build number of the firmware, not only for the stability of the product and the device, but also most importantly for the security reasons. So let's dig into this. So here we have the device, as you can see. On the front we have the Linksys logo and model number E900. There is no external antennas, everything is packed into this box here. On the top we have the five interfaces, the 5 RJ45 standard ports. We have talked and you have read about that. We have a couple of other things, the power plug and so on. And back here on the back side we have a lot of information. So let's try and take a closer look at this. So here on the top, as mentioned, we have the 5 different interfaces. We have the blue part and the yellow part. The blue part is the LAN part. Connections are labeled from 1 to 4. This is the part that also will function as a little 4-port switch, making connections for devices in a small local area network of small LAN. The yellow RJ45 is the connection to the WAN side. It is typically connected to the internet service provider, the ISP for short. And in this case here, we'll not use it in setting up and configuration, but this is the WAN part. Then we have out here we have the power plug. It is a DC direct current, and you can see the symbol is a line and 3 dashes underneath. It is very important that we will not use the wrong power supply that can damage the device for good. So in this case here we need a 12 volt DC power connection. Sometimes you need to pay attention to plus and minus on the tips of the devices, but that will be shown as well. And then lastly we have a on and off button that is kind of handy in this situation here. And then here on the back side we have a lot of details. First we have the reset button up in the top, marked here with number 1. This is always good to know how to get back to factory defaults. We can read the MAC address of the device. As you maybe remember, the first part of the code is called the OUI, Organizational Unique Identifier. We'll come back to that shortly. We can also read the model number, and very important again, the voltage rating, 12 volts, direct current, DC, and we can see that it requires a 0.5 amps. So we'll need to find a suitable power supply for that. Of course it comes in the box, but sometimes things get separated, so it is very important that you you check these things before connecting power. So always double check this before plugging anything on and turning on the power. We have the name of the manufacturer. In this case it says Belkin down here. We will try and investigate that just in a short while. And last, we have the CE improvement. By affixing this CE marking here to a product, a manufacturer declares that the product meets all the legal requirements for CE marking and can be sold throughout the European economic area. This also applies to products that are made in other countries but will need to be sold in the European Union. And we can see this one is made in China, so the manufacturer of this will declare that they meet all the legal requirements for a product sold in the European Union. But let's try and take a closer look at the MAC address. So the first part, 58EF68, will most definitely be the same on all the devices. So the device that you will work with later on will definitely, most certainly have the same. But let's try and look up this OUI here. I'm using a OUI lookup on the internet, and it gives me the name of the company. In this case down here you can see Belkin International Incorporated. So this matches the information that we just read on the back side. And if I go to Wikipedia here, I can see that this also gives me some information. The company was the Linksys company is how do you say it? It's an American brand. It began in 1988 by a couple of Taiwanese immigrants. The company was purchased in 2003 by Cisco. We'll see a little bit of that later on as well. And they sold it in 10 years after, in 2013, to Belkin. So this one kind of how do you say, fulfill the information on the backside. And just as every other tech companies, we can see that it started in their garage. So everything is as it's supposed to be. So now, if I consult the Linksys webpage and find the product, the support for my product here, we can see that the current hardware version is 1. And we can see that the firmware version is 1.0.09 build 2. And if I go into the device that I have, I can see that my firmware version is currently 1.0.02. And this means that my device is not running the optimal firmware and could be vulnerable to security issues. This is something that we really want to avoid, especially in a gateway. So think of it a bit like the Gandalf the Grey could not protect us from the balrog. That is not a pleasant thought. So we'll immediately change the firmware to the most recent update to make our gateway as secure as possible. Here I am on the Linksys webpage, linksys.com, and I just want to show you how to find the things that you need or could be handy to have offline. So first I'll go to the support tab up here, and I'll search for my device. My model number is E900, and the little Wi-Fi router shows up here. And in here we have the support and update for our Linksys router. We can see that we have a user guide PDF here. Maybe it could be a good idea to download it so you have it offline in case you need it. But we can also go into this and see the information that I just showed you. We have the firmware and the build number here. and this is the one that we want. So we can download it from here, and let's just to make it a bit more visible. So down here we can see the latest firmware version, and we can download it so that we are ready to flash it to our device. If we go back and see the user guide here, once again, it can be a good idea to download it, but also down here I have information on how to manually set up. Let's just make that a bit bigger again. So here's the information on how to get access to manually get access to our little router here. So it says that I need to stop if I'm running Cisco Connect. I'm counting on you not installing that. Connect the power adapter and power plug and so on. Connect an Ethernet cable to the computer and one of the Ethernet blue ports on the back of the router. Then go to a web browser on your computer and open the address 192.168.1.1. And then we'll have a login screen, and we will use the password, the username and the password. The default username and default password is admin. And we're going to be talking much more about default passwords and so on in the class. But this is the information that we need in order to connect to our router manually. Yeah, so we reached the time that we've been waiting for, time to connect things, connecting the router to our PC or laptop. Remember to turn off Wi-Fi if you haven't done that already, just so we don't get any interfering in our little setting up here. I still have internet connectivity. As you can see here in the picture, I have my command prompt, and you can see my little device down here not connected to anything. But I've turned off Wi-Fi. But I still have connectivity to the internet. Let's try and ping the Google name server, as you know. So this means that connectivity is now going through my Ethernet cable. So I will try and unplug it, and let's see what happens to my connectivity here. So here is my Ethernet cable unplugged, and the ping command stopped and timed out. So hopefully yours will do the same. But if you still have connectivity, this means that you have forgot to turn off Wi-Fi. So turn off Wi-Fi and make sure that you don't have any connectivity. So let's just stop the pinging over here. Yes. So now I will connect my router, my device here, as we just read in one of the blue connections here, the Ethernet connections on the router, and now it's connected to my computer. So at this point here, I'm beginning setting up a small network. Actually, the smallest that we can get. Let me just clear the background here. So now we have a small topology, beginning to build a small topology consisting of two devices, my laptop or my workstation, my PC, and then the wireless router here. The wireless router, as we saw, is working on a network ID of 192.168.1.0 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0 or /24 as we are used to call it. And the LAN interface, the LAN ports here, the router will have an IP, a static IP of 192.168.1.1/24 default. So my computer will try and get a DHCP dynamic host configuration protocol. So my computer will now be, when I turn this device on here, it will connect and get a IP address from the router. So I made sure that this connection, this power connector here, is a 12 volt DC, capable of providing enough power for my device, and I'm going to be turning it on. So while it is booting up, I can go into my command prompt here and make a release of all the IPs that is on this device here, and as soon as it is booted up, when I'm comfortable, give it a couple of minutes, when I'm comfortable that my device is booted and ready, I can do a IP config renew, and let's see if it's ready to get an IP address. So let's see. Up here I have my Ethernet adapter, and it is looking like it received a new IP address up here. So let's see if we can ping the device. As you remember, the default address of the router, as you could see up here, is 192.168.1.1, and we'll try and ping it and see what happens. And it looks like I have a connectivity to my device over here, so it should be possible for me now to go and look at the web interface. So let's try and do that. So let's get back to our browser here, and let's try and see if we can connect to the router 192.168.1.1, and it remembers my login. So now I'm currently connected to the web interface of 192.168.1.1, and as you can see up here, my firmware version is 1.0.02. That means that my firmware version is not the default version, or the latest version. So it is critical for me to update this device here. So let's go in and see where we can do that. We have a lot of options here, and I can even see that this shows me the Cisco logo up here. So in administration tab, I have a firmware upgrade. We could go to, let's see, where is it, configuration here. Let's just change the language to English so everybody can see what's going on. So in administration firmware upgrade, I need to find a file for the file, my firmware file that I downloaded, and it gives me a hint about stuff here, and a warning that it might take a couple of minutes, and I'm not allowed to turn off the power or press the reset button. So upgrades must not be interrupted, otherwise the device will maybe fail for good and will be unreachable. So please give it time to be sure to do the upgrade. So I will browse and find my latest firmware, and then I will begin updating. So I found my upgrade file, my firmware file, and I can see that it is E900 version 1.0.09 build 2. So I'm comfortable that this is the correct firmware version for my device. So I will begin upgrading, and my device will lose connectivity, and please remember to give it a couple of minutes to upload the firmware and reboot, and then do not interrupt, pull the plug, or restart the device. So I'll begin starting upgrade, and I will get a little indication here about the duration and upload, and then it will reboot. But it is important that I give it time in order to connect back to it. So we can move over here, and while the device is still uploading and booting, I can begin pinging it, and let's see if it's available. So at now it is still available to me. So let's see what happens if I begin pinging it. And we can go and see here it's still uploading information to the upgrade of the device. So shortly when it's done upgrading, it will lose connectivity and the system will be rebooting. So as it should, the connectivity goes down, and then it will do some rebooting of it, request timeout and so on. We'll have a lot of these going on while the system reboots, and it says that we should allow up to 80 seconds for it to reboot. So let's make sure that the device is completely rebooted before going on. So I gave it at least 80 seconds, and now I have got a lot of pinging without timing out. So I'm kind of sure that my device is now operational and will not reboot. So let's try and see if we can connect to it again. So once again, I will go into 192.168.1.1, and this time I will be met by a login information again, and now I can see the Linksys logo up here, router access. So let me try admin again and logging in. Don't save. The logo up here changed to Linksys, and I can now see that my firmware version is the one that I want, 1.0.09. So now my device is at the current at the latest firmware version and the most stable version, and I'm now able to begin setting up this device and doing a lot of stuff on it. So hopefully this introduction to how to connect to the device, give it some time to reboot, and then getting the firmware up to date if the firmware number on your device is lower than the current version on the internet, on Linksys' support page. So try and see if this device is up to date, and try and update it if it is as my device was a firmware version lower than the most recent. So hopefully this will give you an insight to how to connect and do updates on the device.